So, guys, welcome to the Mobility Mindset, a podcast that Sarah and I host. But we got a special guest in here today. This is Jim Peplinski. He is the grandfather of one of the kiddos that we've been working with for a little bit. And we were just kind of hoping that, well, it depends. Jim, do you want me to introduce you or would you prefer to do it?
Let's see what you know, and I'll fill in the gaps.
He just put you on the hot seat, Mark. What? Did you read the bio?
Pull up Wikipedia, but I'm not going to pull up Wikipedia. I do remember this individual from when I was a kid. He used to play on the Calgary Flames, and we used to pretend that we were him playing road hockey out on the street. This is a guy that I remember from my youth fairly well, to be perfectly honest with you. But anyway, this is Jim.
Do I even say like how ignorant I am? Is that hockey?
That is very much hockey.
All right. Jim, just so you know, I'm in the US. My apologies.
Right. Well, I mean, we could be part of you soon, so we'll that's a different discussion.
All day.
So I am so far away from playing. I've been out of the game longer than I was when I retired at 28 years old. The last 35 years, I've got involved in a number of businesses in Calgary, and the most time consuming and maybe personally impactful has been Jim Peplinski Capital. It's gone from a leasing business to a fleet management business to now what I'd say is an emerging merchant bank. And it's been over 35 years for me most gratifying to take what I learned playing hockey about bringing people together and trying to win a game to doing that in business. My life really has been business for the last 35 years, 20 years up until 2020, doing a bunch of work with the Calgary Flames on top of my work with Jim Peplinski Capital and a family office that I built out. We've got 4 grown kids, 2 grandkids, one of which is Zoe, our first. My wife and I have been together since 1977, and we expect that to carry on. And your reference to hockey, Mark, was a wonderful time in my life. I still think I played in the golden years of the game. I'm not complaining about how much money we made through the 80s. I thought it was a lot. I'd still play for the same amount today. Probably played more games against Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier than anybody alive because I was in Calgary for my entire career. And that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of great teammates, a number of very impactful people, from the recently deceased Al McNeil to a guy named Badger Bob Johnson, who came out of Wisconsin, was a wonderful person, had a huge impact on my life. So I have been very, very fortunate in my life, particularly since I came to Calgary in 1980. Grew up in the Ottawa Valley. I met Cass in Toronto, so I've got a good sense of the country. With all of the time that I spent playing hockey and traveling, I've been from one Atlantic to the other many, many times, and up to the Arctic Ocean as well, and down to what used to be the Gulf of Mexico too. So I'm a lucky guy, and I'm impressed with what Trexo has done. And I think it's great that you're taking some time to share that with the world, because it can make a difference in people's lives.
Further to that, would I be able to pry in and see how it's made a difference in your family's life?
Sure. So our Zoe is about 5.5 years old now. She was born October 6, 2019. She's got beautiful big eyes. The bad news was a number of months into her early life, she was diagnosed with a very, very rare and a 1 in a gazillion sort of thing, genetic metabolic disorder. She's got an ITPA deficiency. You can Google it. I don't really understand it, but basically she does not develop neurologically. So she's completely nonverbal. It's very difficult to make eye contact with her. In fact, some might say impossible. Until you get to know her, you do not detect any type of emotion. One of the things that does make her smile is when you tell her that she is going onto the Trexo. She's been on the Trexo now for a couple of years, obviously, or perhaps not, but just to clarify, with no neurological development, her musculature and her skeletal, and I'm going to use terms that I don't necessarily pronounce correctly or understand, but she's got no muscle tone, and so she can't sit. She's completely reliant upon 24/7, 365 care, nonverbal. Needs everything taken care of. Gets fed through a G tube. And as I said, it was so rare. There was, up until 2019, there was 11 kids in the history of the earth diagnosed with this, and 80% of them didn't make it till their 3rd birthday. Zoe is she's a a miracle in some respects. I attribute much of her success to my daughter Erin, who moved heaven and earth to feed her. You know, she didn't know for the first 6 months of her life why she wouldn't swallow. She doesn't have any musculature development in her throat. So, you know, to feed her with an eyedropper, you might imagine how difficult that might be with a kid that's screaming, where a new mom with a new baby is holding that little rascal down on the floor trying to get some nourishment into her because her weight would be dropping. There was all sorts of challenging situations, and you know they still exist. It's just you learn to deal with them, and um, so back to your original question, the Trexel and Zoe. It's been a couple of years now. Zoe's got 450,000 steps. She does smile, if you understand what a smile looks like from Zoe when you put her on it, and the difference that it's made in her from her development, I would say, is stark. I'm not sure what her life would look like without the Trexel. I think, you know, if you asked Erin, and she'd be a better one to speak to, but you know, my contribution would be if your granddaughter's happy, your daughter's happy, and if your daughter's happy, then her mom's happy, and if her mom's happy, then I'm really happy. And so I'm interested in all of their progressions. But it's been profound. So I mean, I'm happy to get to any details that could be helpful to you, but I'll take a breath there and let you recalibrate me as to what you'd like to hear about our experience with Trexo that can be useful to you or to the folks at Trexo or anybody who might be listening.
Well, if I may, Mark, if I
Yeah,
may,
go for it.
Jim, first and foremost, for me as a mom and with a special needs son, I know for me and many parents out there, we can't do it without our in-laws, parents, and my hat goes off to you for helping your family, your kids, your grandbabies, because we can't do this without our tribe. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be a multitude of people. It's just that little network that helps us on a regular basis, big or small, as it's much gratitude. And you know, I thank you, and I know your family thanks you as well, whether they say it all the time or not. I just hearing you makes me want to remember to always say thank you to my mother-in-law and just say thanks, because she's with us all the time. And you know, we're getting ready to go to Canada here on the weekend to come up for a 2-week intensive, and she comes with us all the time. So we couldn't do it without her. So thanks, Jim. I mean, we can't do it without our tribe,
Well,
truly.
this is hard stuff.
It is.
I when I got into business in 1990, after I decided to leave the game. We for your lack of experience with hockey, Sarah, I stumbled into an organization, the Calgary Flames, with the original owners who I knew personally, and I think I've done eulogies for 3 of them. There's still one of them alive today. They're just wonderful, community-minded, very entrepreneurial, decent individuals. And I think, you know, aside from the way I grew up with my mom and dad, coming to Calgary and meeting people like this who were successful financially, but were also very, very socially engaged and responsible, I learned something from them. And then when we won the Stanley Cup, so whatever the World Series thing is or the NFL thing is, you know, that was our thing in Canada. And I decided that even though I had 3 years left in my contract, I wanted to go and do something else. I mistakenly thought that playing hockey was just a game, that there wasn't a career in it. If I knew then what I know now, might I have stayed in hockey in a different way? I'm not sure. But I decided to leave because we had won this Stanley Cup, and it was time for me to go and get a job. And I stumbled into this business, and right from day one, probably more good luck than good management, but there's no question I put a lot of time into it. Things went well, and I always said, man, I just don't know how resilient, how impressive you would have to be running a business that's always losing money. You know, there's always challenges in business or in life, but I thought, you know, people who come into situations where it's fighting the fire, the wolf at the door every day, that's an impressive person, you know, to continue to do something day in and day out for 20, 30, 40 years. That's impressive. I've never been able to do either of those 2 things. And I said, you know, I've been so lucky not to have been faced with those challenges. And then after we saw what Zoe's diagnosis was, I thought, you know, if you haven't had a challenge in your life, just wait, because, you know, if you live long enough, you're going to get it. And I had spent a lot of time. An aunt, Marianne, was born around 1940. She lived to 83, and she had a serious oxygen deficiency at birth, and so she was very, very cognitively and physically impaired. But as a kid, I grew up with that in the Ottawa Valley, and to my grandparents' credit, man, they raised her at a time when you kept that sort of stuff hidden, and these were very it wouldn't be accurate to say that they had modest means. They were poor. This was kind of dirt floor, Ottawa Valley, working in the bush kind of poor. And to raise 7 kids, one of which was severely disabled, and didn't realize it at the time. But I was around this, right? And so Marianne, we were told that she couldn't speak because they tried to teach her English before she learned Polish. Whether they understood that or not, but she was very challenged in that way as well. But she had some common sense, and she was nice. And then when I left home at about 16 to play junior hockey in Toronto, and I got involved with Special Olympics with a guy named Whipper Billy Watson. And then when I came to Calgary, we were a novelty, and so every charity in the world wanted to be around you. And I'd play wheelchair hockey at Gordon Townsend School, and I was involved with Special Olympics right through, and still am. Not as much as through the 80s and 90s, but still am. And so I was around people with disabilities lots, and I thought I understood that, right? And I was really wrong. When Zoe was born, I started to look at the weight on my daughter, and I thought, geez, and like, what are you doing? Back to this thing of, if you haven't had a challenge, just wait. And man, oh man, when you see the challenge of raising somebody with a severe disability, and I know there's lots of people with disabilities, and I'm not saying I'm not going to rank anything, but when you have somebody that requires 24/7, 365 care, man, that's a different deal. And when you don't see that, so they're not going to walk, I mean, I got this one friend, God bless her, but she's dumb as a sack of hammers. She'll say stuff like, "So is Zoe walking yet?" I go, it just
Yeah.
is hard to, it's hard to explain to somebody, and maybe impossible to that particular person. But the point is, until you are in it, and even now, I don't think I can tell you how Aaron feels, but I can see the weight. And so what I've done, because I don't know how much more we can do with Zoe, I put a bunch of time into an organization in Calgary called Rent for Educational Services, and they've got 4 locations, 450 employees, occupational therapists, music therapists, all sorts of specialists, and lots of people who don't have that type of sophisticated education. But what they do have is they all have a love and an interest in caring for people and kids with severe disabilities. And we're in the process of raising $30 million for the first K-12 school in Canada that will serve kids past grade 6. And so back on the what can you do to make a difference, and how do you recognize the load, until you see some of that, until you actually taste it, I don't know that somebody can explain to you what it tastes like. And off of, Sarah, your comments on gratitude and thank you, that's appreciated. But I think the real key is to try to take the message without, I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty, but I've got another young guy who's a buddy of mine. Met him when he was 9 years old. His name's Greg McMeekin. He's got pretty serious cerebral palsy. And I take him out for lunch with Aaron once in a while. We were having lunch here a couple of years ago, and I was feeding him his ice cream, and it was winter, it was February, and his tooth was falling over his eyes. And so I stopped and I said, I'm quite irreverent, as you, I don't know if you guessed that or not, but I said, Greg, like, why don't you say something? So what do you mean? I said, well, you can't. I said, I've been watching you now for half an hour. Your tooth is over your eyes. I've been stuffing ice cream in your face. And I said, why don't you say something? He said, I guess I just kind of learned to live with this stuff, because when he's by himself and he's in his wheelchair coming through a mall, people don't notice him, and they don't say, hey, how you doing? Okay, can I pull your tooth up? They don't think to realize that he can't actually bring his hands up to his face. And so I would say, off of the gratitude piece, what can you do? It sounds maybe a little bit trite, but it's just to open your eyes and care a bit. If you see somebody in a wheelchair, some other do it. I mean, I see somebody in a wheelchair, I've always done this. They say, what got you in this? Some people say, oh, geez, I jumped off a freaking diving board. I was stupid. Other people say, it's the way I was born. It's the way it is. And some people can't speak. And so you sit down and you try to communicate in some way. I often say, and Kath doesn't, my wife doesn't like when I say this, but I think it makes the point. I used to think signing an autograph for a kid in a wheelchair was doing my part. And now I think, gosh, how superficial is that? So I don't know how this all fits into to Trexo or your comments, Sarah, but there's a whole bunch of threads in there that I think are necessary to pull on to try to make a difference. And you can't fix these things. You got to accept them to some extent. But once again, I'll take a breath and say, what have you heard, and what do you think I'm crazy on, and what needs to be expanded upon?
No, I mean, you got me teary-eyed because the last bit is exactly one of the things that just it is disheartening, and it is just that is awareness is, we had just why do folks with disabilities that are in wheelchairs, why do they go unnoticed? They're sitting. They're people too. It just baffles me that that occurs. And it's just having and taking the opportunity, and it just, it's flooding me about emotions just because it saddens me. But I want,
Yeah,
like you
I
said,
think
I mean, it's
I
going to
I
happen every day.
I think I know the answer to some of that, and I'd be happy to take the heat for it. But I think that particularly in today's day and age, most of us fall into the category of being victims at some level. And I think with people, particularly with people with serious disabilities, I think there's an element of invisibility because they simply cannot advocate for themselves. You think of somebody who's able-bodied, and I'm assuming, looking at the two of you, you seem to be reasonably intelligent. I don't think I'm a brain surgeon, but I think I'm average intelligence. And I think I can advocate for myself. But man, if you dropped me in the middle of Beijing today and I had to survive on my own, I didn't have, let's say, my net worth. If I was starting, man, that'd be hard. That'd be hard. And I often joke. I said this to one of my kids earlier this morning. I said, they were asking me about how I started this business and that. And they said, well, where'd you get the confidence? I said, I got lots of confidence. I said, the problem is I'm short on competence. like, like, like I'm confident, and so if I got that confidence and I'm saying, man, that would be hard. How do I put my buddy Greg McMeekin in a wheelchair with serious cerebral palsy and say, yeah, go advocate for yourself? Where he's trying to figure out how to find somebody who can wipe his ass, right? And so how do you advocate for yourself? How do you not be a victim? I'm not judging somebody because they're coming off as a victim. I'm saying let's recognize that, and certainly if we're what I see us to be, try to reduce the victim thing. How do you advocate for yourself? How do you advocate for somebody else? But I think the big thing is for people with particularly serious disabilities, and I don't know how you figure out that range, but you are spending so friggin' much time just trying to survive. Advocating yourself is not on the list. And so if you're not advocating for yourself, you become invisible. But if you are disabled moderately or seriously, number one, you're just trying to survive. And number two, if you have the luxury of having a caregiver, even if that caregiver has got the financial, let's say unlimited financial resources, they still are trying to figure out how to get their own life back on track. Because if you're a mom or a dad of a severely disabled child, uh, one of the things I've noticed is patterns change. Your friends change, your career changes, your holidays change. I mean, Zoe, Kath and I are going to Maui on Friday, and Zoe will never go to Maui. You can't put her on a plane for 7 hours. Oh, let's fly private. Well, let me tell you what that looks like. Then you get her to the beach. So you mean if you put Zoe in the water, it kills her? Because she aspirates, so that's the point. Everything changes. And so I think that it's an unfortunate answer, but I think it's reasonably clear to me. People can't advocate for themselves, and their caregivers are just too worn out to advocate for the child because they're trying to advocate for themselves, trying to get some normalcy in their life. And that's by extension why I think organizations like Renfrew are so valuable, because they give you 8 hours where your kid's going to school. Even if all they are doing at that school is caring for the child, and that that child is loved and nurtured, that they're not necessarily learning calculus. Okay, we'll adjust our expectations. But it gives you, my kid's going to school, I can do something for myself now and not feel guilty about it. And so I don't know if that's right, but watching it from my perspective, I've started to gain some different views and different perspectives. that I think have some weight. I think have some truth to them. And I would say Trexo is a part of that because I mean, think about that when, Erin said to me this morning, she said, man, like there's a park across the hill from me. It's called Glenmore Park, and they got a big 400-meter track. And so last summer we took Zoe out with the Trexo and and we put her in it, and you can, there's enough room. She's not going to run off a cliff. You just set the thing, and it figures out the gate, and so she starts to walk. And so Erin was walking with Zoe holding her hand. She'd never done that, and you think, Jesus, like, wow, like, I'm talking about now. And what used to be hair in the back of my neck is standing up, but I mean, you just don't think about those sorts of experiences that we all just take for granted. Um, jumped in and took your point, Sarah, on why are we invisible? I think there's something to that. And I think that Trexo can help make people less invisible. I don't know how you get them out to people at, I don't know what, 40 grand a crack, that's like $1,800 US. It's
Yeah,
a
honestly,
tempted humor there, Sarah. So,
No,
you're hitting the nail on the head exactly. Like it empowers families to be able to do things and have experiences that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I know exactly what you're saying. That experience of being able to walk with your kid and hold their hand alongside them instead of trying to get their legs moving while you're on your hands and knees trying to teach them something, you get to actually experience something that's positive. You got to take those very rare instances with these kids and, for lack of a better term, run with it, because they're harder to come by.
yeah, well, they're harder to come by. They're not, if you've got, how many kids do you have, Mark?
I just have the one guy.
And is the one guy disabled?
He would be a bit similar to Zoe. I had blinders on completely, and now your all your priorities change, all your perspectives completely change, and honestly, I think you become a better person for it. But at the same time, it is a hard go to get there.
Man, I mean, I don't, like, there's a friend of mine, took a business course at Stanford, and the guy was talking about this deal, and there was 5 cent stock, right? And he said, I looked at this company, it was 5 cent stock. And then 2 years later, the company was now at $5. And so he said, then I invested in it because it was a better deal at $5 than it was at 5 cents. And the guy said, I'm glad I waited, and do you get the parallel here? So my observation would be, man, is it ever great to have a severely disabled child so that I can see those perspectives? Well, I would prefer not to have gone through this torture to see those perspectives. And so if we can find a way to communicate that, as I think about this and think about memes and Instagram and that sort of stuff, here's a picture of walking with your kid holding their hand, and you think it's nothing. And this is the most important thing in this person. How do you communicate that to bring about that caring and that awareness so that you're not, I'm not looking for sympathy here. I'm looking for awareness to help individuals be better. And I'm okay taking the torture with Zoe. Got it. I'll deal with it. But man, if there's something that you can turn from chicken shit into chicken salad, let's do that. And
well,
and maybe Trexo's a part of that. Maybe.
Jim, you're speaking my language. He said chicken shit to chicken salad. I'm down, man. Jim, you're just meeting us for the first time. Mark, you might have met Jim maybe previously or chatted,
I
but
wish.
sometimes, as we say in Girls You Can Blurt Bliss Out, it's a shit show on a daily basis. Mark and I are special needs parents, and there's days where we're just like, we've been up all week, all night.
I'm telling
Mark
you
and I,
right now,
we both have night shift, because
my
both
son was up
both our
having seizures all night last night. That's
yep,
why I look like
yep.
like hell right now.
Yeah, we
Because
both have kids with 24/7 too, and it's a thing, and just, I just got off the phone, I'm just trying to I come from a law enforcement background. Stress is my middle name, so I'm used to it. But this, like you said, is a different level, and having to experience this is just a new level for me. And I can usually keep my stressometer in check, but like yesterday and today, I was off my guard. I was off rails, and why I'm bringing this up is awareness. And we're coming up for an intensive to Canada, I always book our trips ahead of time because I'm looking for accommodations to suit our needs, for bedrooms, to have to carry our son, multiple different things. Well, this gentleman decides to cancel us 4 days out. So he doesn't get the grasp of last minute accommodations for a special needs family is just far and few between.
It's not a thing.
So I took the time to educate him, and he just, clueless to the matter. But anyways,
And where are you going to?
coming up to Burlington, going to Smile.
Yeah, Smile Therapy in Burlington's a.
So, but I tried to
great
explain the
spot.
gentleman, I said, I look in advance, A, to proximity to the location, B, the accessibility of the home and accommodate the family, and then C, budget, to try to keep the budget in check. I said, when you throw me the curveball, I'm going to have to pay triple. I said, you don't understand. And so he's like, you're not out any money. And I said, let me explain things to you. And, I said, I'll look into it further. I said, we have an agreement. I said, I'll look into it further when I get up there in Burlington. But the point being is you need to learn about disabilities and be more cognizant of it than the almighty dollar. So
well,
unfortunate.
I got ideas on that, but maybe for another day. Mark, have you got your son on any special diet?
So we used to be on a pureed diet because of aspirated pneumonias and that kind of thing as well.
YouTube?
No. So before this, I worked with guys with acquired brain injuries at Hamilton Health Sciences for 17 years. And I used to work with guys on swallowing and trying to do that. So I was really reluctant when they mentioned G-tube to allow for that because I wanted to see what I was going to be able to get away with.
Yeah.
Honestly, like he went from a kid with 2 bouts of aspirated pneumonia, and we were pureeing his fluids and foods. Sorry, thickening his fluids and pureeing his foods. And then after 6 months of using the Trexo, he went to solid foods, and we've never gone back. He's been
the seizure thing. Everybody's got a solution, but Aaron somehow figured out with Zoe. She put her on a keto diet, and Zoe went from 50 seizures a day to almost 0.
That was a conversation last week with the neurology team about potentially adopting a keto diet.
Yeah.
But they mentioned that it's very difficult for orally fed kids to do a keto diet as opposed to G-tube.
Yeah, probably G-tube, but it seems to be pretty seamless. And Zoe takes a little bit orally, but most of her nutrition comes from a G-tube and a pump thing. Works good.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that they bring up the keto because we started exploring, my son has epilepsy too, and we went through a big spell of seizures. One of our trips up to Canada during intensives, we had a big seizure spell, and we were doing life flights from our property here at home. A good solid month, a good couple life flights. They just landed in our yard and rolled with it. But
what's a life flight?
Helicopter and to your house.
I'm very much okay. Tell me what the solution is. Give me some suggestions here. We can love the idea of there's all these different things wrong. Great. What do you suggest? Pardon? What do you suggest? No, I'm not here for suggestions. I'm here for problems. Okay. I'm trying to figure out solutions. And so I would say one of the things, this is very simplistic, but there should be somewhere in the disabled world, there should be if I'm booking something, here is a template. This is what I require. And I'm not going to sue you, but it's really important that I can get this committed because if it changes, it's going to ruin something for me. So you don't have to repeat this every time, right? Because here's the sheet. This is what I need. And so, your buddy in Burlington or wherever you're going looks at that. And at least, I got an old friend who's dead now, a guy named Ken King. He used to say, I'm just going to make him lie. I'm not holding him to it, but we'll be clear. I'll make him lie. And so, look, I need this. I need you to pick me up at 6:00 with a 12-seat van. And if you don't do that, somebody's going to die. Do you sign up? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, great. And if the guy doesn't do that, he at least knows that he's responsible for it. But you make it so that it's almost impossible to understand because for sure, I've got another saying that came from the same guy. Things don't happen in ones. There's somebody else with a disabled child who's had exactly the same experience. So let's put something on a website that says, here's some things that can help you if you're traveling. And, that's chicken shit, but it's a start. It at least gets to the earlier part of the discussion of of are you a victim or are you trying to come up with solutions?
Right.
This kid that I mentioned, Greg McMeekin, he's on the Alberta Disabled Advisory Council or something, and he wants to get sidewalks, all the sidewalks in the slits, access. Okay, I said, why don't you start with a name tag around anybody who doesn't have the use of their hands that says, "Hi, my name's Greg. If my hat's over my face, can you give me a hand?" You're worried about getting upstairs in a building that you're never going to go to that's going to cost me $10 million, and people aren't seeing you. Maybe we should start a little simpler. And I'm not trying to dismiss the importance of access. I'm saying maybe we should get some wins here. So sorry to cut you off there, Sarah, but those
No,
are
no,
pieces
I
that I
love
think
it.
here's a solution.
Side of course, but as it takes approvals and money and blah 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 blah. Let's start with bring it down about 5 million notches. And what can you work on today? What
Right.
can you control? It's
Yep.
just like anything else. What can you focus on that's within your wheelhouse that maybe you can change within an hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes?
So Sarah, you don't have a Trexo in
I
Ohio.
do. I
Oh
do.
yeah.
My
Oh, you
son's
do?
in a truck as well.
Yep.
Oh,
He
wow.
loves it.
So one of the things I would say to Trexo World and me, and I've looked at his business. I mean, I'm interested in helping him in some way. He was doing some work and we haven't reconnected on it, but I've got this sharing thing going on, right? I mean, when I go to Costco, I say to the kids, I'm going to Costco. Anybody need anything? And I got a rack in the basement. If you need toilet paper, I got 80 loaves. And all right, whatever. And and when they're doing something that can save me a trip, then I hope they let me know. And so I did something with Jen Peplinski Capital in Toronto. We did a trial when Uber had wheelchair assisted vehicles. I haven't got to this, but Zoe's got a wheelchair van in Calgary, and she uses it a lot. She uses it an hour once a week, and the thing sits there, and it's, I don't know, 70 grand or something. And so I don't know, maybe there's a kid next door who can't afford it, and they can use it. So the technology with Trexo, if you're, Zoe's now, I don't know, 38 pounds and 43 inches tall or something, and whatever the distance is from the middle of her knee to her ankle is something. Maybe you could just take and give the kid who's 67 inches and 86 pounds the foot things, and they got their own foot things. And if they live in Zoe's neighborhood, or if they don't, they can come over and you plug them into it, because, Zoe's got 450,000 steps, so it sounds like a lot, but that's 40 minutes a day. And so I don't know, I mean, I run into this on the fleet management side of Jim Peplinski Capital, not to get into the gory details, but the margins in fleet management are pretty thin. And the way you can make a return is by leverage, okay? Financial leverage. And what that means in a different way is I cannot really reduce the cost to my customers because the margin is so thin. How do I reduce the cost to my customers? I lease them fewer vehicles. Well, that can't be good for me. Well, I don't know. What if somebody uses vehicles from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and somebody else uses the same vehicle from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? I don't know. What if I can say to somebody, look, instead of you requiring 30 vehicles for 12 months of the year, you only actually need 20 vehicles for 12 months of the year, and you need 10 vehicles for 3 months of the year. So how do I figure that out so that you use fewer vehicles and your cost comes down? And what I will get out of that is I will get more customers using fewer vehicles, which will mean more vehicles for me. And so, does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Okay, so how do we do that with Trexo? How do we do that with wheelchair vans? How do we do that with Waymo? Is there a Waymo? Have you been in Waymo yet?
I have not.
Yeah,
Wheelchair vans I can see. Trexos get a little bit more complicated because of all the customizable parts and the programming to fit it to a child.
yeah, that's my point though. The programming. So you get a chip and you stick in chip for Zoe. And what's your son's name, Mark?
Mitchell.
You stick in a chip for Mitchell. I mean, don't tell me about programming. I got Elon.
Oh, no. It's not that. Like Zoe is very similar to my son, where they don't have contractures. Really loose, easy kids to work with. We can get full ranges of motion. But the kids that can't do that, if we try and move their legs in that same way, we're going to hurt them. But that's the programming piece that I'm talking about that's different
Yeah,
from one child to the next. So
yeah, yeah.
but that's it. It's just reprogramming.
Think about all of these assets that we have laying around that get used. I mean, there's a reason that Waymo will probably work. There's an opportunity if you actually want to make a difference for the environment to get rid of your vehicles, fewer vehicles, because but try to convince a 75-year-old that they shouldn't drive anymore, that they should call Uber. You get stuck in your ways, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, not to
So
segue, Jim, I've been on those calls as a law enforcement officer, having the kids call me to try to convince their parents, hey, I got to take your license. It's
yeah,
time. And yeah, but
so that's
sorry to cut you off.
it's a shift in mind. Well, it's a shift in mindset, right? It isn't,
Yep.
Dad, I got to take your license. It's you're smart enough to use this technology. Go wherever you want, whenever you want, and don't worry about running over somebody.
Yep.
And guess
Absolutely.
what? It's cheaper for you to do 50 Uber rides a year than to have your car sitting in the garage paying insurance and all. It's cheaper. Everything's better. And you think it's because you've lost your independence? Actually, you've gained access that you didn't know you had. So how do we think about disabilities and Trexo and those sorts of things in a way that that can make a positive difference? How do we get that awareness piece out there where I'm not a victim? Where is, I don't know the question to this or the answer to this, but where is the value add of each person to society, whether you're disabled or able-bodied? Where's the value add? And I'm not saying that everybody's got to be inventing stuff, but I think that there's a certain responsibility, and how do we crystallize that? People figure out what their own responsibility is, and they bring something to the table. I don't know how that works for Mitchell or for Zoe, but I'd say maybe in some situations I got to do a little bit more for Mitchell. Maybe I do a little bit more, and so I've learned that from Mitchell in some way, and I can take some credit for that. Kind of, I gotcha. Hey, I gotcha on this one, right? So let's figure out how to be positive and proactive, and at the same time, hey, I'm not trying to bring disability to the world so that we can all learn something.
Well, this isn't a new thing. This isn't a new topic. This has been since forever and ever and ever. I think it's just, again, it's still something that has to be talked about, said, discussed. I think our community needs to, I hate to say unfortunately, but I think like I have learned to wrap my head around it, and it's made me even a better, more positive person. You ask everybody at work, I'm pretty positive in general, but I think it's really, my eyes are even more different and my visual stimulation's more different. And that I think that as a whole, this community that we're in, I find, and I try to look at it, that I'm blessed because I have the opportunity to take my voice, because I'm an advocate through and through for anything, any day, every way. Whether it's my son, whether it's the person getting bullied, it's a point that we can all work together to hold hands, cross America via video, whatever the case may be. But it doesn't take a big army. It's creativity, it's having structure, and having it organized to be able to get our word out. And that's one of the things why we did this podcast. It's not about selling Trexos. It's about, we want to help. I mean, gosh, Mark and I spend hours and hours and hours speaking to families time and time again. And oh my word, I even the man meat was like, there's days, I mean, I'll talk to them, and sometimes parents, we're the only people that they'll talk to, because they're stay-at-home moms. They only are with their children. That's all they get. So they don't have any adult interactions sometimes. And so some of them are on the edge, and you've got to talk to them. And multiple times, and I will talk about it time and all the time. We have a segment about it. We will continue to talk mental health. Keep your parents in check, help them out, talk to them. Doctors fail to talk about them. They always ask, how's the kids? How's the kids? But you know what? You're sending them home with the parents. How are the mom and dad? How are the caretakers? There's so much to this whole thing every day, every minute. It's so
Well,
important.
pick one
So
thing and do it.
That's it. Fight the little
I'm
fires.
telling
Don't
you.
worry about the big
I always
blazes.
say grandma is my sanity. I always tell her when she comes, I'm like this. God bless you. I bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Because I get my break, honest to goodness. My son's downstairs right now, just, while I work, and she's on her way tomorrow. And
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, speaking of which, I'm getting the hook here and I got to go back to the kid who's on March break. I think we have to wrap it up. But like, honestly,
Permission to be dismissed.
well, you've been hitting the nail on the head here, one after the other, like all afternoon. Like
seriously,
you're saying it better than Sarah or I have in the past. So we very much appreciate the fact that you're on here and saying your piece because it was
Well, keep her going, man. We'll see you somewhere. Good luck in Burlington, Sarah.